So Baruch Hashem, this shir is going to become a steady shir Sunday night. And I feel very unpleasant and uneasy. At the very first shir, I will not live up to my word. It was publicized that the topic of tonight's shir will be Sfiras HaWomer, and it will not be Sfiras HaWomer, and I'll explain why. So when my dear friend Reb Hersh Cooper asked me, what would the first shir be about? I said Sfiras HaWomer. But we planned to give that shir last week. This week is Achnamois Kedoshim, and this week we have the mitzvah of V'yohavto l'royacho kamocha. I can't skip that mitzvah. So today we will be discussing V'yohavto l'royacho kamocha, and next week is Parshas Emor. Parshas Emor is Sfiras HaWomer. So anybody that came tonight expecting a shir on Sfiras HaWomer will need to come next week. And that shir will be given next week. Parshas Emor, we have the mitzvah of Usfartem Lochem. And this week is V'yohavto l'royacho kamocha. Rebbe Kiva says, Yerushalmi nedorim lamed amud beis. V'yohavto l'royacho kamocha ze klal godel b'Torah. Obviously, this is one of the greatest mitzvahs, and I think everybody will appreciate a shir on the mitzvah of V'yohavto l'royacho kamocha. So how do we define the mitzvah in Parshas Kedoshim of V'yohavto l'royacho kamocha? Is it a mitzvah shebelev? Is it all about sentiment and emotion? You need to love every fellow Jew, or does it require more than just your feelings? Is V'yohavto l'royacho kamocha about your sentiments and your feelings, or is it about your deeds and your actions? So the pasuk in this week's parsha says, "Lo yisikim v'lo yisitor es bnei amecho v'yohavto l'royacho kamocha ani Hashem." The Ramban on the spot writes, "V'yohavto l'royacho kamocha is derech hafloga." It is somewhat of an exaggeration, because it is human nature. You care more about yourself than you care about others. And it would be exaggerated to expect a person to love every other Jew like you love yourself. And the Ramban quotes Rebbe Kiva. Rebbe Kiva says, "Chayechu koidmin l'chayei chavecho." So if you come before others, then how would we literally translate and interpret V'yohavto l'royacho kamocha like others? So the Ramban writes, it is maybe somewhat of an exaggeration, but then the Ramban writes, V'yohavto l'royacho kamocha doesn't mean how much, but how. And that is clear in the Rambam twice. The Rambam both in Hilchos Deos and in Hilchos Ovel. In Perek Yud Daled of Hilchos Ovel. And the Rambam in Hilchos Ovel writes all the halachas of mitzvahs gemilas chasodim, and that is Perek Yud Daled in Hilchos Ovel. And I'm reading the Rambam. Mitzvahs asay shel devreim, levaker cholim, lenachem avelem, lehoitzi es hameis, להכניס את הקלו, ללוות אורחים ולעסוק בכל צורכי הקבורה, וכן לשמח חוסן וקלו, ואלו הם גמילס חסודים שבגופוי, שאין להם שיעור. So the Rambam writes, this entire spectrum of chesed, begufoi, not your money, not your possessions, but gemilas chasodim begufoi, achnusas orchem, nichum avelem, bikar choylem, mitzvah shel devreim, mitzvahs derabonim, אף על פי שכל מצוות אלו מדבריהם, הרי הם בכלל ויאהבתו לרוyacho kamocha. כל הדבורים שעתו רויסו, שיעשו אויסם לכו אחרים, עשי אויסן עתו להוכיחו בתורה ומצוות. Whatever you wish, and whatever you would want others to do for you, you do for others. So the Rambam clearly says, v'yohavto l'royacho kamocha is not only about the way you feel, it's not about your sentiment, it is about the way you act and interact and react with other people and to other people. Kol oisen advorim that you would like others to do for you, you do for others, and therefore the Rambam writes, all these mitzvahs, which are defined as gemilas chasodim begufoi, are included in v'ahavta l'reacho kamocha. So there seems to be some inner contradiction in this Rambam, because the Rambam on one hand writes that these are mitzvahs derabanan, mitzvahs midivreim, but v'ahavta l'reacho kamocha was a mitzvah d'oraisa. It's a pasuk in this week's parsha. And if the Rambam writes all these mitzvahs are included and we have to reacho kamocha, so why does he write the mitzvahs midirabanan? The answer is a very simple one. I will try to define it clearly. When you engage in any of these actions, biker choylem, nichum avelem, l'sameach osam ekala, you're mekayim a mitzvah d'oraisa. But if you abstain from doing these deeds, you're not mevatel a mitzvah d'oraisa. The mitzvah d'oraisa is not only to love other people in your heart, but make them happy. It is about caring for others, but there are 1,000 ways in which you could care for others. And min haTorah, you don't necessarily need to be mevaker choylem. Well, I could suggest many other deeds that are not included in the Rambam. How about visiting prisoners in jail that are very depressed, they don't have many visitors, they are in dire straits, and I know some people that took upon themselves, they visit people that are in jail. And that is also a mitzvah d'oraisa v'ahavta l'reacho kamocha, but it's not included in this list. So in a hot chamsin day, you start on the corner, you sit at the corner of your block and you have cold lemonade and you offer anybody that's out there in the heat in the street, do you want a cold drink? That is included in v'ahavta l'reacho kamocha. So what I mean to say, v'ahavta l'reacho kamocha could manifest itself in 100 different ways. And in each of these deeds, you're makayim b'mitzvah v'ahavta l'reacho kamocha. It doesn't necessarily need to be nichum avelem or achnosas kala or biker choylem. So when you are engaged in these mitzvahs, you are mekayim a mitzvah d'oraisa, but if you abstain, you're not mevatel a mitzvah d'oraisa as long as you care for people in any other way. Because all these mitzvahs we find in Chazal, biker choylem is a mitzvah, nichum avelem is a mitzvah, lavoyes a meis is a mitzvah, achnosas kala is a mitzvah. When you engage in any of these deeds, you're mekayim a mitzvah d'oraisa. But if you abstain from doing these deeds, you're not mevatel a mitzvah d'oraisa, because there are still 100 other ways in which I could be mekayim v'ahavta l'reacho kamocha. If I do nothing for others, and I do nothing to make other people happy, then I'm mevatel a mitzvah d'oraisa v'ahavta l'reacho kamocha. But if I do something for others and I make them happy, it doesn't necessarily min haTorah need to be nichum avelem or achnosas kala or biker choylem. And that is the definition of a mitzvah derabanan sheyesh lo ikar min haTorah. It's a mitzvah derabanan sheyesh lo ikar min haTorah. All these acts of gemilas chasodim begufoi are mitzvahs derabanan, but they are part of a mitzvah d'oraisa v'ahavta l'reacho kamocha. And that is the clarity of this definition of this Haggadah. So the Rambam writes in the very same halacha, these are mitzvahs midivreim, and if you abstain from biker choylem, you're mevatel a mitzvah derabanan, because Rachamim said, this is a mitzvah you should engage in. Nichum avelem, biker choylem, lavoyes ameis, achnosas kala. If you don't do any of these, or you don't do all of these, you're mevatel a mitzvah derabanan. But as long as you do something for others, you're still mekayim v'ahavta l'reacho kamocha. So this is the fundamental definition of mitzvah derabanan sheyesh lo ikar min haTorah. So it is clear in the Rambam, this is not only about your sentiments. Ahava is a sentiment. Ahava is an emotion. But this mitzvah requires more than loving other people. You need to manifest your love of other people and do something with it. You need to care for other people and make them happy. So does this sound familiar to you? Whatever you want others to do for you, do for others. it surely sounds familiar to all of you, and that is the story that Chazal tell in Shabbos Daf Lamed Aleph about a girl that wanted to be Megayer. And he came and he asked Shammai, could you please give me conversion? I want to become a Yid. And Shammai asked him, so are you willing to take everything upon yourself? And he says, Gayaraini al manasha kaim kol haTorah kula al regal achas. Regal achas. Shammai was a builder. Dochoi b'masa binyan asher biyodoi. Loosely translated, he threw him down all the steps. And he told him, get lost. There is no such a thing, l'kaim kol haTorah kula al regal achas. You need to take upon yourself taryag mitzvahs. So in desperation, he turns to Hillel. And Hillel tells him, Mada alach sani lechavrech lo ta'avid, ve'idach pirusha, zil gemor. So Hillel accepts him. And he tells him, whatever you would not like others to do for you, don't do for others. All the rest is commentary. All the rest, we'll deal with it. We'll teach you. But first of all, this is what you need to appreciate and understand. But it's interesting. Hillel teaches us the same principle in the negative tense. He doesn't say, do for others what you would like others to do for you. He says, don't do to others what you wouldn't like others to do to you. So, if this is v'yahavtu l'reachu kamocha according to the Rambam, this Rambam obviously is inspired by Hillel HaZokan in Shabbos Daf Lamed Aleph. So why does Hillel present this idea in the negative way and the Rambam in positive? So I have an open Chumash here. So Targum Onkelos on the mitzvah v'yahavtu l'reachu kamocha is literally translated, uterachmei lechavroch kavosach. You should love others like you love yourself. But Targum Yonason quotes Hillel, madalach sani lechavrach lo ta'avid. Now let me make an interesting comment. Targum Yonason is Yonason ben Uziel. That is a discussion we don't have time to get into today. The Chido, some argue that Targum Yonason is not Yonason ben Uziel, and it's a Gemara and Megillah. But in Pashtus, Targum Yonason is Yonason ben Uziel. Do you know whose Rebbe, who was Yonason ben Uziel's Rebbe? He's a Talmud of Hillel HaZokan. That's a Gemara in Sukkot Daf Chof Ches. Godol shebetalmidei Hillel HaZokan is Yonason ben Uziel. Kotten shebetalmidav is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So Yonason ben Uziel, who wrote the Targum, is a Talmud of Hillel. It should be no wonder that Targum Yonason in this pasuk we have to Achu Kamocha quotes Hillel HaZokan. So in the Gemara Shabbos Daf Lamed Aleph, the Gemara doesn't mention v'yahavtu l'reachu kamocha. The Gemara just tells a story. This guy wanted to be Jewish, and Hillel and Shammai throws him out of the house, and he says, don't expect to become a ger without working on it. There are taryag mitzvahs. You need to take the entire package. And Hillel is the embracing one, and Hillel says, "Mother alach sani lechavrach lo ta'avid." But the Gemara doesn't quote v'yahavtu. It is Yonason, the Talmud of Hillel, that is his interpretation of the mitzvah v'yahavtu l'reachu kamocha. And then comes the Rambam, and the Rambam shares the same pshat in v'yahavtu l'reachu kamocha, but in the positive sense. And the Rambam says, "Kol oisen hadvorim she'ato roitze sheyasu acherem lecho, asei ato oisam la'acherem." So the Marshon Shabbos Lamed Aleph asks this question. Why is Hillel speaking in the negative expression and not in the positive? Why does he say, "Madalach sani lechavrach lo ta'avid," and he doesn't say, "Do for others what you would want others to do for you"? Why is he talking about don't be a bad person? Isn't v'yahavtu l'reachu kamocha about being a good person? So I'm not going to hurt anybody. I'm not going to embarrass people. I'm not going to hit people. I'm not going to shout at people. Is that enough? So the Mashur asks, and the Mashur has an interesting answer, and he says, I quoted the Rambam before, Chayecha koid melachai chavecha. And the Meshul also has an argument. The reisha of the same posik is a lav. Lo tikom, lo titor es b'nei amecho, v'hafti achu kamocha. So it is reasonable, just like the reisha, lo isikum v'lo isitor, it is b'shev al taisa, v'hafti achu kamocha should also be b'shev al taisa. But that is a shvacha argument. Why? After all, lo isikum v'lo isitor are lo taisa. V'hafti achu kamocha, everybody agrees, is a mitzvah say. It's not a lo ta'asa. Lo ta'asa shev al ta'isa, mitzvah say should be kumvasei. So my feeling is this, and everybody is entitled to give his feeling. Shammai throws the guy out of his house. Hillel is the embracing one, and Hillel says, after all, this person is not Jewish. Right now he's a goy. Well, we will bring him into the fold. And he's going to be nechnas tachas kanfei shchina. How much could you expect of a guy? I mean, maybe it will be too much to expect of him. Go out of your way and make people happy. So he gives this convert the minimal requirement. And he says, don't hurt people. Be decent. Don't hurt people. Take upon yourself never to do to others what you don't want others to do for you. I think stage number 2, when it'll come back next time, Hillel probably told him what the Rambam says. It's not enough not to be bad. You need to be compassionate. You need to be good. But stage number 1, Hillel wants to be a makar of this person. And Rashi writes there that Hillel was impressed by his personality. And Hillel was convinced once they start learning with him, he will be a good Jew. So I don't think this is much of a kasha. Hillel gives them the minimal requirement. Anyway, Hillel says, this is only aleph base. There's much more to it. Idach pirusha. We still will learn. So at some stage, Hillel definitely shared with him the Rambam's pshat v'yaftu achu kamocha. It's not enough not to hurt other people. You need to go out of your way to make them happy. So fundamentally, what we learn from the Rambam is v'yohavta l'reachu kamocha is not only about your sentiments and the way you feel about other people. It is the way you act. It is your deeds. It is your actions. It is the way you react and interact with other people. And you need to go out of your way to do chesed. And that is why the Rambam says, all these are expressions and manifestations of v'yohavta l'reachu kamocha. Does that mean it's not about your sentiments? Definitely not. So let me share with you a musar thought. But I think it is so emes and so poshet and so powerful. There are 2 Gemaras that seem to convey the very same message, but it's a different sprach, a different language. Shabbos Kuf Lamed Gimel, everybody is familiar. Ze keli va'anveyu, havei domelo. Mahu rachum afatu rachum. Mahu chanun afatu chanun. Havei domelo. How does that fit into va'anveyu? Rashi explains. Va'anveyu is an abbreviation of 2 words. Ani v'hu. I and him. Zakeli va'anveyu. So how could you be similar to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? What does it mean? Va'anveyu is ani v'hu. So the Gemara says, Havei domelo. Mahu rachum afatu rachum. Hu chanun afatu chanun. Soita Yudalet, there's another Gemara. And another posuk. Achrei Hashem lekechem telechun, v'chi efshar laleches acharov, halo eish oichalo hu. Follow HaKadosh Baruch Hu's ways. How could one follow HaKadosh Baruch Hu's ways? He is fire. You can't come near to fire. Halech b'drachov, mahu mevaker choilem, afatu baker choilem. Mahu choinen dalem, afatu chanoin dalem. Is this the same message? Different language. Not only different language. Chazal deal with 2 different psukim. Cannot be the same. Because Shabbos Kufel Med Gimel, Chazal interpret the posuk Zekele Vanveu. And so it Yudalet Achrei Hashem Elokechem Telechun. So I think the emes is, we know people. And as you walk the walks of life, you get to know people. Sometimes you know people, and this person is compassionate, he's caring, he's a lovely person, but for some reason, he's not engaged. He doesn't volunteer. He doesn't go out of his way. We never see him out there helping others. He comes to shul, he sits on his place, he walks out. He's a good person, but for some reason, he doesn't express his compassion and his feelings. He loves others, but he loves himself much more. And he's busy with himself, and for some reason, doesn't take care of others. And maybe he's such a huge masmid that he's always learning. So he doesn't have time for Biker Choylem or Nichom Avelim because he thinks Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, and if you learn, you don't need to do anything else. So sometimes you meet wonderful people, but they don't engage in chesed. On the other hand, you get to know people that are day and night busy with chesed. This one has a gemach for motzitzim, for baby pacifiers. And this one has a gemach for, for diapers. And this one runs an organization of volunteers in hospital. And they're really engaged day and night in chesed. But when you get to know them on the personal level, they're not people of compassion. They're not nice people. So why do they do chasodim? They might be great tzaddikim, and they know it's a mitzvah. And they're great. But that is not enough. So Chazal teach us. On one hand, havei domelo. You need to try to be like a Kodesh Baruch Hu. Mahu rachum afatu rachum. Chanun afatu chanun. You need to be a person of caring and compassion and love. But that is not enough. Halech bidrochov. Mahu mevaker choylem afatu baker choylem. Mahu choynen dalam afatu chanoin dalam. And the shlemus of a person is twofold. You need to care. And you need to express your caring. You need to engage. If you engage and you don't care, you're doing a mitzvah. Bedinu sheyital secharoi. He's doing a mitzvah, and he will be rewarded. But he's not doimel HaKodesh Baruch Hu. He's not mekayim va'anvehu. And if you're compassionate, but you don't do anything with your compassion, then you're definitely lacking. Achrei Hashem lekechem telechun, baker choylem, chanoin dalen. So the shlemus of a person is twofold. You need to engage in Gemilas Chasodim. And you need to engage in Gemilas Chasodim because you care, because you're compassionate. And both are included in V'yahavtu. Because on one hand, ein mikra yotzeh midei pshutoi. And the Pasuk says you should love every other Jew. The Rambam says it's not only about loving, it's not only about sentiment, it's about the way you act. You need to care for others. You need to take care of others. So these two Gemaras fill in one for the other. Achrei Hashem lekechem telechun, halech bedrochav, v'havei domelo. You should be rachum v'chanan on one hand, and you should engage. And both are included in V'yahavtu Yachu Kamocha. Because on one hand, the Rambam's interpretation is Gemilas Chasodim Begufoi, and that includes Biker Choylem and Nichum Avelim and Achnos Askala and the Sameach Osam V'Kala, but it definitely means caring, and that is Pshutoi Shel Mikra Ve'in Makri Yotzeh Midei Pshutoi V'yahavtu L'Reacha Kamocha. So that is the fundamental. Now, Rabbi Kiva says, yes.
Perhaps the question that Rob asked earlier, the difference between Madlach Sandel and Madlach Sabi, could that be if someone does something nasty to someone else? Let's say he speaks not nicely, so maybe he's very nice to the body, but maybe he's also a vatel mitzvah saseh, because he's doing something. Definitely so. Yes. Because when the Rambam says, do to others what you expect others to do for you, kal v'chomer, that you can do to others what you would not like others to do
to you, definitely. So the Rambam goes a step further than Hillel. But Hillel's teaching is definitely included in the Rambam's understanding of V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, definitely. So if you're nasty to other people, besides Noah's Devorim, it's also a bittul mitzvah to say of V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, definitely. So Minchas Oshem Bava Kama, Siman Aleph, the very first Siman of Minchas Oshem Bava Kama, there's a very lengthy discussion about what is the source of the Issa Lahazik Momen Chaveiroi. Nowhere in the Torah is there Issa Lahazik Momen Chaveiroi. There is a Chiyuv Tashlumin. Maka Behem Yishalmena. There's a Issa of Chayvel B'Chaveiroi, which is causing physical harm or pain, and that is Lo Yosef La'Koisoi. But there is no lav in the Torah, Lo Lahazik Momen Chaveiroi. So there's a lengthy discussion, and I bring some sources say the entire Issa Lahazik Momen Chaveiroi is V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. And that is based on the negative side of V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Don't do to others what you would not like others do to you. You wouldn't like anybody causing damage and loss to you, so don't do that to others. So in Bava Kama Siman Aleph and Minchas Osher, there's a lengthy discussion, but one of the drochim, one of the interpretations I bring there is V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, and that is the source of the Issa Lahazik Momen Chaveiroi. So Rebbe Kiva teaches us V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha ze klal godol b'Torah, and in a way, Rebbe Kiva is in Torah's Koyanim and also in Yerushalmi, Nedorim Lamed Omed Beis. So Rebbe Kiva was not a disciple of Hillel HaZoken. He was much younger than Hillel HaZoken. He's the third generation. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is a Talmud of Hillel. Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus is a Talmud of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And Rebbe Kiva is a Talmud of Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus. But I think when Hillel tells that convert, that ger, Mad alach sani lechavrach lo ta'avid, and Yonis ben Azir, who's a Talmud of Hillel, that's his perush in V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Obviously, that is in a way similar to what Rebbe Kiva says. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha is not merely one of the Taryag. It's not just one of the Ramach mitzvahs asay. It is one of the fundamentals. Ze klal godel b'Torah. So what Rebbe Kiva teaches us, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha ze klal godel b'Torah, somewhat is connected to what Hillel told that convert. You want to know kol Torah kula rega lachas, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. So what I want to say now is an amazing insight. When Rebbe Kiva says ze klal godel b'Torah, it's not only in Musar. I think it's a fundamental halachic yesod, which I realized when I learned Sanhedrin Pei Daled Omed Beis. And when Rebbe Kiva says that klal godel b'Torah is not only in Musar, not only in Midas Chasidus, it is the yesod of the entire system of Ben Odom L'Chaveiroi. Sanhedrin Pei Daled Omed Beis, there is a boy in the Gemara, Ben Mai Sheyakes Dam La'oviv. So a father needs a medical procedure, which is bloodletting. We don't do that anymore. But in days of yore, it was considered extremely beneficial to your health. And people used to come from time to time, and the doctor or the practitioner just let out his blood, and that was bloodletting. And it was considered beneficial to your health. And the Gemara asks, could a child do that procedure to his father? Or would it be a chiyuv misa of maka oviv, yamus, yumas? Would it be maka oviv? Because after all, I'm shedding my father's blood. But it is to his benefit. I'm not hurting him. This is what he wants me to do. So the Gemara has an abaya. Ben Mashiach is domen, and the Gemara says, mutar. Why? V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Rashi says, this is what your father wants you to do. He's happy. and you would want others to do it for you because it's a medical procedure which is beneficial to your health. But the question wasn't in the halachas of Yehavterecha Kamocha. The question was Maka Oviv Yumas. It's a Chiyav Misa. So, Tanoi Bechitin, V'hoideloi B'sa'arin. The question was in the Lotas and the Lav of Maka Oviv Yumas, and the answer is Yehavterecha Kamocha. What does one have to do with the other? What we learn from this Gemara is V'Yehavterecha Kamocha is not merely a mitzvah to say, it is the basis of the entire system, all the mitzvahs shebein odam lechaveiroi. And even the lotasa of Maka Aviv is based on V'Yehavterecha Kamocha. And therefore, if what you're doing to your father, you're shedding his blood, yes, you are. But because it is to his benefit, it cannot be a lotas, it cannot be an aveda. Because if it's an aveda, it goes against V'Yehavterecha Kamocha. V'Yehavterecha Kamocha means do to others what you want others to do for you. But V'Yehavterecha Kamocha has nothing to do with Ava Ben. V'Yehavterecha Kamocha is any two Jews in the world. What does this have to do with Maka Oviv Yumas? The answer is V'Yehavterecha Kamocha is a klal gadol b'Torah. Not only in Musa, not only Chassidus. It is the most fundamental principle in the entire system, which includes Maka Oviv Yumas. So this Gemara teaches us, when a Bekiva says Zeklal Godel B'Torah, it's not only in the importance of this mitzvah, in Musar, in Chassidus, it is Klal Godel in Din, Klal Godel in Aloha. And the principle of V'Yehavterecha Kamocha dictates all the entire system, all other mitzvahs shebein odam lechaveiroi, which include kibbud avim, which include Maka Oviv Yumas. And that is an amazing insight, which I did not see anybody really discussing. And now we move on to another yesod, which I discussed at great length in Minchas Osher Vayikro Siman Nun Vav. It is a very lengthy discussion, which we don't have time to address at great length, but I will give 3 examples. Nera la'anius daiti, that there is a fundamental difference between the entire system of mitzvah shebein odam l'mokaim and the system of mitzvah shebein odam l'chaveiroi. In mitzvah shebein odam l'mokaim, in Brachas Daf Chav, the Gemara quotes a pasuk. Ein eitza ve'ein chochma ve'ein tvuna neged Hashem. You need to perform mitzvahs, and they do not depend on your intentions, on your feelings, what you want to achieve. You need to perform mitzvahs shebein odam l'mokaim. And tamei ha-mitzvahs lo nisgalu. Bein odam l'chaveiroi is different. And the fundamental of Bein Odam L'Chaveiroi is a posuk in Parshas Ve'eschanan. V'osisu hayosho v'hatoiv be'enei Hashem. V'osisu hayosho v'hatoiv. The Ramban writes, both in Parshas Ve'eschanan and Parshas Yisroi, there are 2 psukim in the Torah which are general mitzvahs. One bein odam l'mokaim and the other bein odam l'chaveiroi. Kedoshim tihiyu. This week's parsha. First posuk in Parshas Kedoshim. Kedoshim tihiyu. The Ramban explains. Kedoshim tihiyu means shelo yehei novol b'reshus haTorah. So the Ramban writes, a person could perform all the mitzvahs bein odam l'mokaim, but he lacks kedusha. He's a baltaiva. He is a person that is full of lust. He doesn't act out his evil inclinations. Kedoshim tiyu means you need to strive to be kadosh. Kedusha is precious. Kedusha means living a life of holiness, a life of dveikus to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Kedoshim is a general mitzvah. Besides all the mitzvahs beinodam lamokim, you need to daven 3 times a day and say Mea Bruchas B'Kol Yom and say Hiyoımhashchor v'Arvis. And you need Shabbos to say Kiddush and Avdolah and Sukkah v'Lulav and Matzah v'Moror. But besides all the specifics, besides the details, there is a general rule: be holy. The equivalent to Kedoshim Tiyu and Beinodam L'Chaveiro is V'osisu hayosher v'atoiv. Because a person could perform all the mitzvahs Shebeinodam L'Chaveiro, as we mentioned before, but he still doesn't do good, and he isn't a good person. V'osisu hayosher v'atoiv. Hayosher v'atoiv is do what's right and what is compassionate. Yosher is what is just and right. V'atoiv is what is good. Do good and do right. And that's what Siso Yosher v'atoiv. And I think in Mitzvah Shebeinodam L'Chaveiro, it is all based on V'osisu hayosher v'atoiv. And I want to bring 3 examples of it is legitimate to violate a mitzvah shebeinodam l'chaveiro, a technical violation, if you're doing what is right and you're doing what is good, even though technically you're over on an aveira shebeinodam l'chaveiro. Kedushin daf samach tes. A person had a child who was a mamzer. Mamzeris is a tragedy and a curse. Throughout all my years, I have dedicated a lot of time and energy to try to help people when a cloud of mamzeris hovered over their heads. And many people were zeicha, living his bias be Yisrael, because of my efforts. And I see this as a huge schus. Years ago, when we made a campaign, a fundraising campaign, a person in our office jokingly said, "Where's the file of the mamzerim? They should be very helpful, in our efforts to raise funds." We don't keep a file of mamzerim, no. Each and every one of them is anonymous, and Baruch Hashem. So mamzeris is a terrible curse. And in many cases, when you really look into the case and you deal with it with a halachic clarity, people could be saved. So anyway, there was this person that had a mamzer, and Rab Shamloi tells him, if you would come to me before this child was born, I would give you an eitzah that your children should not be mamzerim. How? What eitzah would you give me? I would tell you, go steal from someone. And when they bring you to Beis Din, say, I don't have any money to pay. And Beis Din will sell you as an Eved Ivri. Eved Ivri, his master, could match him with a Shifchei Kananis. The child would be a Eved Kanani. And then he will get a Shtar Shiur, and he will be a Yisol Kosher. Because by Goyim, there's no din of mamzeris. By Eved Kanani, there's no din of mamzeris. So Reb Shamloi said, from now on, if you want to have more children, go steal from someone. And when they bring you to base and say, I don't have any money to pay, you will be sold as an Eved Ivri. You'll have a Shifchei Kananis. The child will be an Eved Kanani, and then he'll get a Shtar Shiur, and he could marry any Jewish person, and their children would be B'nai Yisrael Ksherim. So the Rishonim ask, how does it give him an eitzah to steal? In Bava Metzia Samach Aleph, the Gemara says, Goynev al menas l'shalom is an issa d'oraisa. So even though I'll be sold, the person I stole from will get his compensation, but it's an avera. It's an loisignoivo. How does it give an eitzah to steal? Tosfos Shlit on the spot says, כיוון שדעתו לשלם, ומכוון להכשיר זרוי, mutar. I don't want to cause anyone damage. I'm not stealing because I want to have benefit from money that's not mine. And he's going to be compensated. You know, they're going to sell me as an Eved Ivri, either to him or to someone else, and he's going to get his money back. And why am I stealing? I have the purest intention in the world. I want to salvage my children from the nega, from the curse of mamzeres. So Tosfos said that would not be an aveda. Technically, I'm stealing. And that is an issur of geneva. But I mean no bad. My intention is the purest of intentions, and I'm not causing damage to anyone because he's going to get his money back shortly. And therefore, that's mutar. So this is a gewaltige chiddush. Bava Basra Ter Zayin. The Gemara speaks about Eov. And the Gemara speaks about what a tzaddik Eov was. And the Gemara says, what did he do? When he became aware there are young Yesomim whose father passed away, and the father left fields, and there's no one to tend to their fields, Eov took possession of those fields and plowed and sowed and harvested, and he supported the Yesomim. Technically, he was over of an issur of gezela, because Yasmalav b'nei mechila. You can't sign a contract with Yesomim, and Ktanim have no right to give anything away. And Eov didn't even ask them. He just stormed into their fields, broke down the gate, and did whatever needs to be done. And then, out of the plenty of fruit, he supported their families. And the Gemara says, what a tzaddik Eov was. And the Meiri on the spot asks, but technically, that's gzeila. You took possession of fields that belong to others. They're not yours. Who gave you reshus to do this? And the Meiri says, he had no personal benefit. He just did it for the Yesomim. And therefore, that would be totally permissible, amazingly. The Meiri in Bava Basra Ter Zayin, dealing with Eov, quotes the Gemara in Kedushin Samach Tes Reb Shamlai that Gerava Eitza to be Metar Mamzerim. So the Meiri, one of the great Rishonim, sees a common thread, a common denominator, a tzaddik between these two sugyas. And what do they have in common? A technical aveira, which is va'osisu hayosher v'hatoiv. What I did was compassionate. It was totally out of compassion and caring for others. And I really caused no harm. I caused no loss and damage. So I did what is right, and asiti yosher, and I did toiv. Technically, in both cases, we're dealing with gzeila. Story number 3, which is a bit amusing. And, you know, sometimes Rabbi said, and I'm not saying a joke, I'm just telling a story that we find in the Gemara. Rabbi Babachona comes to town, and he was the Gadol Ador. Rav Yehuda has a koilel. And Rav Yehuda makes an effort to invite Rabbi Babachona to give a shiur in his koilel. And the Gabbai says, no way. No way. He came to rest. He's on chofesh. He's not coming to your koilel. And Rav Yehuda is very distressed. We need to bring him to the koilel because we have so much to learn from him. So Rav Yehuda sends his shamus, whose name was Adadaila. And he says, when Rabbi Babachona goes to davening tomorrow morning, snatch his hat off his head and bring it to our koilel. You know, grab his hat off his head and run away. The old man won't catch you. You could run faster than him. Tomorrow morning, that's what Adadaila does. He grabs Rabbi Bachona's hat off his head and he runs away. And they all start chasing him. And Rabbi Babachona, the old man, finds himself in koilel. And Rabbi Yehuda asks, Machzirin es hashever or yen machzirin es hashever? if a limb was dislocated on Shabbos? Could you put it back in place? And Rabbi Babachona says, of course, Machzinan is a shever. Rabbi Yehuda smiles and he tells us Talmidim, wasn't that a spark of genius? We got Rabbi Babachona into our kollel and he's teaching us Torah. So what was the heter to grab his hat off his head and run away? That's gzela. It's not even gneva. It's gzela. It's loy sigzel. You grabbed a person's hat off his head and you ran away? So none of the Rishonim asks this question, but I do. This is obviously mamish loy sigzel. So Rabbi Bar Bechona got his hat back. 5 minutes later, he got his hat back. And he taught us Torah and kollel. And Rabbi Yehuda had no bad intentions. He had no intention of taking anything away from Rabbi Bechona. He just thought we need him. We're learning a sugya and he has so much to teach us. So this is source number 3. Technically, that was mamish gzelet, loy segzel. But nobody had any bad intentions. Nobody wanted to take anything away from another. And this is an interesting psak of Rabbi Yehuda. Unlike the first two examples, which are totally out of compassion, but learning Torah is an important mitzvah. Maybe the most important mitzvah, Talmud Torah Geneged Kulam. So Rabbi Yehuda paskind, this is what we need to do. Grab his hat, and we just want him in kollel, because we have some shaylos we need to ask him, and he is the one we want to learn from. So these are a few examples. And in my sefer, I brought many more. The fundamental axiom of the entire system ben Adam l'chaveiro is Sisu hayosho v'atoiv. And in many sugyas we find, unlike ben Adam l'mokoim, which is ein chochma ve'ein tvuna ve'ein eitze neged Hashem, because we don't know the essence of ben Adam l'mokoim. Tamei hamitzvos alone is galu. But ben Adam l'chaveiro, it is all about doing what's right and doing what's good. V'osiso hayosho v'atoiv. And that's why we find many sources when the intentions are pure and compassionate, and we're not really causing damage or loss to anyone. We're not. They're going to get theirs back in a very short time, and they will be compensated. Then a technical aveda turns out to be a mitzvah, and that is Yesod Gadol. But whenever I share this Yesod, I say, nobody could judge for himself. This is very dangerous. This is a dynamite, it's an explosive charge. Maybe a nuclear device, because it is very easy to rationalize. Everybody could rationalize. I mean good, and, I'm just explaining sources that we find. But this idea is rarely applicable, and you need to be very, very careful, because it's so easy to rationalize and say, this is the right thing to do. This is what he deserves, and I just mean good. So this halachic principle, I say, handle with care. It's very fragile. It's a very fragile material, and it needs to be handled with care. And it's rarely applicable, but it's a yesod choshev in the entire realm of mitzvahs shebein adam l'chaveiro. Yes, Moshe.
When the Gemara Makis says that the Yeshiva Zela is lav intak laseh, maybe there is no lav any longer.
Lav anitek laseh is only a ptur from Malkus. It is not a heter. Lav anitek laseh is just a principle. There is no Malkus. Instead of Malkus, you have the mitzvah say, but it is not a heter. So we discussed the mitzvah of v'yohavto l'reachu kamocha, and how relevant this sugya is in the days of Sfira. The days of Sfira, Soima, we are noyeg menoge avelus. The Ramban at the Torah writes that the days ben Pesach la'atzeres originally are like the days ben Sukkos la'atzeres, Shmini Atzeres. And the days between the first day of Sukkot and Shmini Atzeres are Chol HaMoed. So the days of Sfiras U'Omer originally were days of joy, of Simcha, of Yom Tov, but they were tragically transformed into days of mourning. Chov daled elef talmidei Rebbe Akiva meisu bein Pesach la'atzeres. And ad hayom hazeh, we are noyeg minhag avelos. So many people would wonder, we have been through so many tragedies in our history. And many, along the way, there were so many times that we lost far more than 24,000 people, to the Crusaders and in the Inquisition in Spain and in Portugal and so many different stations along the way. And it is only the tragedy of Talmidei Rebbe Akiva that we mourn every year. So I think it is not only about the cost of human tragedy, which is something we need to feel. We need to feel tragedy. It is an entire generation of Torah teachers that perished. Rebbe Akiva was the greatest Tana of his time. And an entire generation of Talmidei Chachamim and Marbitza Torah perished. V'hoyahu olam shomim. That is the lashon of the Gemara in Yevamah Beis. V'hoyahu olam shomim. And the world became barren. There was no one to teach Torah, and the entire heritage and legacy and transmission of Torah was in danger. When an entire generation of the greatest scholars perished in one short period. V'hoyahu olam shomim. Ad shabora bekiva etzer rabbeinu shebedorim v'shanu lehem. Rebbe Akiva in his elderly years found the strength to start all over again, to start from Bereshis, from Aleph. And then he taught the 5 greatest Tanoim, Reb Meir, Reb Yehuda, Reb Yossi, Reb Elazar, and Reb Shimon bar Yochai. And that is why this is something we need to remember every year. Because it was not only the toll of human tragedy and suffering, it was the entire transmission of Torah was endangered. And why? Shaloi nagu kavod zeh b'zeh. And whenever I speak about this sugya, I say, Loi nagu kavod zeh b'zeh. Is that a lav sheyesh beikoros or misa b'dei shomayim? Why such a terrible predicament? Death, shaloi nagu kavod zeh b'zeh. And I think it is because you were Talmidei Rebbe Akiva. So a story I heard many times from my great Rebbe, from the Kloisenberger Rebbe, who was a giant of our time. And he used to tell, one of my earliest recollections, he said, I was a young boy sitting in my father's lap. And the father of the Kloisenberger Rebbe was the Rudniker Rav, and he was a grandson of the Divrei Chaim, of the great sons of Rav. And I heard many times from my Rebbe, the Kloisenberger Rebbe, I was sitting on my father's lap and he was crying. And I asked him, Tata, was weinst du? Father, why are you crying? And he said, Ich bin dich makana, zalman leib. That is how he was called as a child. I envy you. And I said, Tata, you're a big Rebbe, you have a lot of Hasidim. I'm a little boy. I envy you. Why do you envy me? And he said, because you didn't know the Divrei Chaim. You didn't see the Tzanz Rav, the Tzanz Zayda. And I was baffled. And I asked my father, that's another reason I should envy you. You had the privilege of learning from the Divrei Chaim, from the Tzanz Rav. I was born after his demise. So my father said, you didn't see the Divrei Chaim. So what will they demand from you up there in the heavens? Lachamei Avesrim. What do you expect of me? I didn't see the Tzanz Rav. But I saw the Tzanz Rav, my father told me. And they would ask me, what did you learn from that great tzaddik? What did you learn? You're an anikel of the Tzanz Rav. So I think those 24,000 Talmidim, they were asked by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you call yourselves Talmidim of the great Rebbe Akiva? Where were you when he said, V'yahavtu l'reachu kamocha zeh klal godel b'Torah? Where were you when he said Perek Gimel of Masechet Avos, Chovev Odom Shenivro B'Tzelem, Chibi Yisera Noidas Lo Shenivro B'Tzelem Elokim. Where were you? Where were you? How could you call yourselves Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva if you learned nothing from him? So they weren't Chayev Misa. But the mere fact that they were Zeichet to be Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva. So being the Talmud of a great tzaddik is not only a privilege, it's a liability sometimes. It is a responsibility. If you were Zeichet to be Mishamish, a great Gadol, and you were exposed to greatness, so that much more is demanded from you and expected of you. And that is why, because they were Talmidei Rabbi Akiva, that is why tragedy struck. Loi nagu kavod ze beze. And that is why we are noig minhag avelis up to this very day, every year, thousands of years later. Lag BaOmer is a day of simcha. And why is that? So it is popularly known that this is the day, the Yortzeit of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. But the Shulchan Aruch writes a different reason. And a Simetov Tzadik Gimel Siv Beis, the Shulchan Aruch writes, the days of Sfira of days are Avelis, of mourning, up to Lag BaOmer. Mipnei she'omrim she'pasku melamus. The plague was over by Lag BaOmer. And that is why this day is no longer a day of mourning. The plague was over. But why was it over in Lag BaOmer? Nobody explains. So let me share with you my feeling. Mem Tes Yemei Omer coincide with Mem Ches Dvorim Shatoyre Nikneis Bohem. Rabbi Salanter, the founder of the Mussar movement, taught his Talmidim every day of Sfira, from day one, you need to learn Perek Vav Masechet Avos, and you need to work on one of the Kinyonei Torah. A few years ago, for a group of my Talmidim in America, they asked me to record a brief message every day of the Sfira, moving forward, Mem Ches Dvorim Shatoyre Nikneis Behem, and I did. I think it's available somewhere if you try to look for it. And before, Rebbe Salanta, the Chidush Harim says the same. And whenever I share this idea, I say, Ma yachpat lehem lechazal omar shatoyre nikneis b'mem tes devorim? Why didn't Chazal say, there are mem tet kinyonei Torah, and then my drosha would be so perfect. Mem tes yemei svira, keneged mem tes kinyonei Torah. As if dafka, Chazal say mem ches devorim, 48 and not 49. But if Chazal say 48, that's Ruach HaKodesh. And whatever Chazal say is ba'oimik binosam u'beruach kodsham. And if Chazal say it's 48, it's 48. Aleim ein lo'osif u'mehem ein ligroa. You remember the first Mishnah in Masechet Megillah? Lo poches v'lo yoser. Mem ches dvorim shatoyre nikneis lo poches v'lo yoser. But still the numbers are too close to just ignore. So many Gedolim throughout the ages said, Mem tes yemei svira coincide with Mem ches dvorim shatoyre nikneis behem. So maybe at another opportunity we'll discuss, so what do we do with the extra day? Let's put that aside. So Rabbi Salanter, Chidush Harim, and many others say, Mem tes yemei svira coincide with Mem ches dvorim shatoyre nikneis behem. If you take out a siddur or a mishnayos and you start counting, 32 is oyev es habriyos. And my feeling is, what the Besoas Lanta taught his Talmidim, and the Chidush Harim taught his Chasidim, Rebbe Akiva also taught his Talmidim. So, every day of Yemei Esvira, they worked on another midah. Day 32 is oyev es habriyos. Day 33, the plague was over. Because when they worked and oyeves abrios, they probably were better than they were before, and they learned to love each other and respect each other, and that is why day 33, Posku Melamus, because day 32 is Oyev Esabrios. Kach libi oimali. So this sugya v'hafti acha kamocha was very relevant in the days of Svira. And that is why he decided, once again apologizing, that today's shiur will be about v'hafti acha kamocha. And Be'ez Hashem, next week we will come back to the halachas of Svira Zu'oimam. So v'hafti acha kamocha zeh klal godel b'Torah, and as we learned today, it is not only about your sentiments, it is about the way you act. And you need to go out of your way to be caring and compassionate and try to be helpful in any way. And that is the mitzvah haftar acha kamocha. Ani Hashem. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu acts to us midah keneged midah. And we have compassion for others. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has compassion and love for us, and we're zoicha to midas harachamim. This has been a painful year and a half, and we didn't have many opportunities to talk. But we're still in the middle of this war. And yesterday, Shabbos afternoon, I gave a shiur. And after the shiur, a few young people came to me and they told me, tomorrow morning, we're going into Gaza. I should give them a bracha. They should all come safely home. So we still need to daven, because obviously there's a lot going on. Shakadosh Baruch Yerachem Aleinu. So when we care for each other, Kol hamaracham al habrios, marachamim olav ben hashamayim, the Gemara says in Shabbos Kuf Nam Gimel. So when we are makayim the mitzvah haftar acha kamocha, that is ma'orer ahavas Hashem and rachamei shamayim. We should only be mavaseh psoides toivis in Yeshua's and HaChomes, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should send us Moshiach Tzidkenu b'mheiro v'yomeinu amen.